Hi guys, welcome to another video. In my DMs on Instagram, I do get asked quite a lot about the comparison between this C43 and my previous CLA 45 AMG, because apparently a lot of you guys out there are actually considering which car to buy. By the CLA 45, I mean the previous Gen 1. So I thought in this video I'm going to go through the three major differences between this C43, which is the facelift version, and the previous generation CLA 45, so 2016 onwards up to 2018. I will make some comparisons with the current CLA 45S. So if you're interested in the main differences between the two, then this is definitely the video for you, and let's get straight into this. As a reference point, these two cars, is that a Taycan? It is, isn't it? Nice that. Anyway, as a reference point, these two cars are fairly similar when it comes to numbers. So I'm on about performance. Power, torque, weight. Yet they behave completely differently, if I'm honest. Having owned the CLA 45 for 3 years, and I've owned this car for a year now. One of the biggest changes that I noticed, and I think anyone would notice jumping between the two cars, is even though they've got near pretty much the same power output, 381 in the CLA 45 and about 390 in this C43, the power delivery is completely different, and that's all down to, in my opinion, the transmission and how it does it. Mentioned it in lots of previous videos. In the CLA 45, you've got a proper double clutch system in there, 7-speed double clutch. The nature of those is that in full automatic, around town, they are a bit jerky. There's just no real two ways about that. However, when you're in Sport Plus, using the paddles, changing gears for yourself, that's where it's very rewarding, and it just changes gear so quick. So you jump. What is he doing? A lot of distractions today on the road, but yeah, right. So yeah, it changes gear in the blink of a second, and there is no jerkiness. You're not waiting around for gears or anything like that, and that's just generally how a double clutch worked. In this C43, it's not a double clutch. We've got 9-speed Mercedes 9G-tronic torque converter automatic, basically, and the roles are reverse. Really good in comfort mode, really seamless, barely notice anything. But when you do put it into sport mode, especially when you use the paddles, that's when it does start to jerk about. You do have to wait for gears, and it's not as brutal as you find in a double clutch, and it's for that reason why a CLA 45 will feel quicker. I mean, it is quicker to 60 by a good few tenths, but it just it hits you in the back. Like every time I accelerated in the CLA 45, my head would kind of hit the headrest, whereas in this, the power delivery is a lot more progressive. I'm not being thrown back in my seat. It's not to say that it's slow or anything like that, because it's far from slow. Acceleration wise, when I'm in Sport Plus, I do like using the paddles, very nice paddles as well, but I find myself having to kind of pull them early, because otherwise you will run into the limiter. Another thing with the transmission, in the CLA 45, when you accelerated with a bit of turning circle on, you'd still accelerate ridiculously hard. You'd have some wheel slip, there's a bit of drama to it all, but the power delivery stayed pretty much the same. Whereas in this, if you try and accelerate with lock, it limits it a bit, and that will be a mixture of the transmission, the stability control, and actually how the four-wheel drive systems work, because in the CLA 45, the 4MATIC is a Haldex system, bit of like a fake four-wheel drive if you want to be really nitpicky. But basically, it's front-wheel drive biased in the CLA 45, whereas in this you've got more of a proper 4MATIC system that's near 50-50, although it's rearward biased, so in theory that should make it a bit more playful, but in reality everything's just dulled down a bit more in the C43, which, you know, it kind of makes sense. You know, this isn't meant to be the fully hardcore version of the C-Class. You know, you've got the C43 for that. But as a result, you know, just the transmission kind of transforms how the two cars feel. This isn't as lively as the CLA 45, and that's what I do miss about my previous CLA 45. Right, that's enough about the transmission. I always bang on about it, so let's move on to the second big thing. The second major difference is the kind of the interior and the tech, as you'd expect. I'm going to make references to the current gen CLA 45S because in my previous CLA 45 did look really dated inside. Now, obviously, with the new CLA 45S, you've got the full MBUX system, so it's touchscreen. You've got the two displays kind of set in front of you, but it looks like it's just, you know, on a long kind of horizontal bar. Whereas in the C43, this is the facelift, so I do have, you know, a virtual cockpit that you didn't used to get. Some of this has been updated with the maps, etc. However, it's still not MBUX. So, you know, none of this is touchscreen or anything. And, you know, we're not going to get MBUX in a C-Class until the next gen, and it's not even been announced yet. So at the very earliest, I'm thinking next summer. So, you know, this is the very latest tech you can get in a C-Class at the minute. But the thing is, the more I see, you know, like in the A-Class, CLA, whatever, those horizontal screens, I don't really like the design of them, because it's not, you know, one long screen, it's actually screens inbuilt. And when you think about it like that, there isn't really any design aesthetics just been slapped on. Whereas with this, having a proper kind of cockpit display, even though, you know, it's fully virtual, what does it remind me? It reminds me of an AMG GTR, for example, and it just feels a lot more racy. And, you know, when you're going for the AMG badge, that's what you're looking for. So I imagine in the next C-Class we are going to go with this kind of just one single screen across, and I don't really like it, but that's just the way it's going to go. So, you know, between the two, it's down to personal preference what kind of design style you prefer. The third major difference for me is actually the ride and kind of, you know, the ride setup. There aren't going to be too many surprises in this, but just from a standpoint of, you know, someone who's owned both cars and giving you kind of like a bit of a real world perspective into both. Busy in hell. Yeah, so the CLA 45 that I had, it didn't have the kind of multiple suspension settings. It was pretty basic in that sense, and it was just stiff. It was stiff throughout in Comfort, Sport, Sport Plus. Personally, I was a young lad. I'd like to think I still am a young lad. I didn't really care too much about that stuff. If you're on, for example, on the other end of the spectrum, you know, my dad hated the ride. Anytime he sat in the CLA 45 or drove it himself, he just hated it. It was just too stiff. And also in the CLA 45, you had full Recaro AMG bucket seats, which, as racing seats, they were very comfortable for what they were, but naturally not as like soft and pliable as, you know, the sports seats you get in these. Wow. It's busy in the centre. I think it's the sun. But yeah, when you with my CLA 45, I didn't do like long arduous journeys in it all the time. You know, I did do, you know, the occasional 200-mile journey to kind of like London and back or whatever. And where you'd actually notice it, even, you know, for myself, where I didn't really care about kind of the ride and everything, you arrive at your destination a little bit more tired, because, you know, the ride is firm, the seats are a bit firmer, low profile tyres, and, you know, there's a bit more road noise because it's not as well insulated as, you know, this C43 AMG. Whereas in contrast, this is a highly comfortable car. You know, when you want it to be, it can transform into, you know, a fully fat, you know, like a proper AMG, which, you know, is what I was looking for. But on occasion, or most of the time when you're driving, you know, you do want it to be really easy to drive, comfortable, anyone can kind of drive it. And, you know, this C43 passes the seal of approval from my dad, for example. He actually drives this a lot more than what he wanted to do in the CLA 45. So the C43 gets the best of both worlds in that sense. You know, it's more of a day-to-day car. Now, for me, those are the three biggest changes. There are other smaller changes and things like that. Both cars, I think, in my opinion, for what they were, sounded pretty decent. You know, the CLA 45 sounding good for what you could get out of 4-cylinder engine. Naturally, this 3-litre bi-turbo V6 just sounds better, just all the way through. Like, I'll demonstrate it now. You get more of a throaty growl all the way through the rev range, whereas in the CLA 45 is a bit tinny, and then you kind of had the drama when you pull the shift paddle and you'd have a loud bang on upshift, which was kind of dialed in anyway, so you can't really say that's from the engine or anything like that. Whereas with this, you don't get as many of the pops and crackles and stuff like that, and that's mainly because, you know, EU regulations with what they call PPF filters, petrol particulate filters, which making cars sound a bit more dull and boring, but that's just the way we're headed. Other changes off the top of my head. Build quality is better in this, as you would expect. This is kind of like a step up from the CLA. There's less plastic trim all around. You get a bit more aluminium and, you know, this fancy stuff here. Even in the very latest CLA 45, the seat controls and things like that, even though it's been moved up onto here like the C-Class, but again, it just looks a little bit cheaper, which, no real complaints. Mercedes has obviously done that on purpose. You know, they don't want to kind of, you know, they want to remind you that the CLA does sit below a C-Class. Practicality, a CLA does have a sloping roofline, so there's less rear headroom, if that's, you know, something you care about. I'm pretty short, so it doesn't really matter. I don't sit in the back of my car either, so I've never really bothered about that or cared about it too much. But there you have it, guys. If I've missed anything out between, you know, the CLA 45 and the C43, you got other questions for it, let me know down in the comments or DM me on Instagram. I'll do my best to get back to you on either platform. If you do think if this video has been of use or remotely enjoyable, do give it a big thumbs up. It helps the channel out massively, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.